Okay, I think we're ready to roll. Yes? Thumbs up everywhere? Okay. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Inclusive Hiring Week. My name is Stephanie Stockmer, and I'm going to be sharing with you some information today about how to cultivate your experiential learning strategy. Hello to those of you who are joining us remotely. I'm not seeing myself on screen right now at all. So if I am doing anything that is unhelpful, please let me know. Feel free to interrupt me if you need to, or if the tech is not working. So I am the Director of Applied and Experiential Learning, and I worked with a few other folks to put this presentation together. Melissa Vieira will jump in a little bit later in academic and career advising, and my colleague Morgan Knapp in the McCall Center for Civic Engagement wasn't able to be here today, but also contributed to the presentation. So I'm going to talk as if I'm talking to a room full of people, but that does not mean that you all who are specifically here can't interrupt to ask questions and take questions from the chat, of course, as well. So our agenda today is to talk about experiential learning and why it matters, with an eye to how to design experiences with intention, maximize your experiences, get the most out of it you possibly can, apply your experiences to the job search process, and then we'll connect you with some campus contacts and resources for any next steps that you might be thinking about. So first, just a little bit of backdrop here. Why do I do the thing that I do? Why experiential learning? What's the big deal about it? Experiential learning is a particular kind of learning that has a lot of side benefits that go along with it. So just what we're talking about on the basic level is having the kinds of experiences that prompt people to engage in some reflective, cognitive processes, thinking about what happened, unpacking assumptions, thinking about expectations, thinking about what you learned. And with all of that, then coming to some new understanding, gleaning some new takeaways, and then doing things differently as a result. And that particular cycle of learning includes a lot of different kinds of activities that we do here at Pacific, and I'll talk a little bit more about those as we go along. But I like to think about 9 great reasons to do experiential learning. And we'll get into each of these as we go through the presentation today. Career exploration, applying your knowledge, building your skills, working with diverse coworkers and clients, networking, understanding organizations, recommendations, resumes and applications, and interview answers. These stand pretty well on their own, but there's one more biggie. Employers really like it. So this data comes from a recent Inside Higher Ed article, and I know that the graphic is such that it might be hard to see the individual statements here, but it's around the kind of experiences that students have in college that employers indicated they would be much more likely to consider. So this is the highest end on that kind of scale, not even looking at a little bit more likely to consider. This is all much more likely. And experiential learning opportunities fall high on that list. Internships, working with diversity, campus employment, or having a job in college, global learning, and community-based learning, what we would refer to as civic engagement. And the things that are particularly interesting to me about the employer feedback is the difference between the blue and the red columns here. The blue column is all employers. And you can tell from the all employers category, this is the order that it's going in from highest to least. Internships is right there at the top with 49% of all employers saying it would be much more likely for them to hire somebody with an internship under their belt. But if you look at the red column, that's employers under 40. So that's the future. That's where we're going in employment trends. And that's the case right now for people who are managers who are hiring and they themselves are under 40. For them, working with diversity and completing a community-based project or civic engagement experience are the highest, 53 and 54%. Also working with faculty on a research project ranks pretty high. And for the record, some of those other opportunities are also things that we do at Pacific, like having a senior capstone project, writing intensive courses. So Pacific is coming out pretty well at the end of this thing. Experiential learning comes out really high. So I don't like to put that as the #1 thing, but it's not a bad side effect of experiential learning that employers value it so highly. So what does that mean for a situation like Inclusive Hiring Week and thinking about how experiential learning connects to other issues we've been talking about this week related to the hiring process? Experiential learning is considered what education nerds like myself call a high impact practice. So there's been a lot of research in colleges and universities about what works, what helps students get to the finish line, what helps increase learning, what helps students who maybe have not historically done as well as a population trend in higher ed to be more successful. Experiential learning is right up there with other high impact practices. That means that it has great potential to be of even more benefit to students who may have experienced marginalization in other areas of their life. But guess what? Marginalized students are the least likely to experience those kinds of experiential learning opportunities that I mentioned in that previous slide. Internships, jobs and work study, global learning, community-based learning. So we have some room to do to close that gap and try to encourage students who maybe wouldn't have participated in experiential learning in the past, that this is for you. This is something that you can do and you can be in charge of how it unfolds. Also, how that looks for different populations, what the experiential learning experience is really like, is under-researched. We have room to learn more about that to try to make those experiences even better for underserved students. So by the end of today's session, what I want you to come away with is a bit of an experiential learning strategy, at least a draft, at least an idea in your head of what that might be like for you. That means having a little bit of a design plan in mind, thinking ahead about how to maximize your experiences, and thinking about how to apply those experiences in your job search process. So we'll start with designing your experience and talk first about career exploration, then knowledge application, and skill building. So thinking about career exploration, this is one of my favorite reasons to do experiential learning. You get to try on different activities before you really have to commit by accepting a job offer or applying to graduate school and getting in and actually deciding that that's your next step. With experiential learning, you get to explore, you get to dabble a little bit, you get to see if you like working with the younger kids or the older kids more. You get to see what it's like working in a school versus working in a nonprofit, or working in a small organization versus a big one. So you get to experience different activities, try on different roles, and see what they feel like as part of your path. I also like to remind people that the false starts or the things that tell you that this is not what you want to do, those are just as valuable as the experiences that point you in that direction. All of the experiences that you might have are part of your career path, which has already started, however curvy that path may be for you. And certainly there are some people who find that path and it's pretty straight and narrow. There are a lot of us for whom there were curves in the road before we landed on the thing that we have really latched onto. And there's a lot more for whom that path continues to be curvy for their whole lives, and that's okay too. So wherever you are and whatever you're doing, your experiential learning can be part of your story that explains what you're offering to the world through your career. One of the things that is great about experiential learning is it can really invigorate your studies. And I chose that word carefully, intentionally. It can bring to life what would otherwise be just in 2D on paper, or would be something that you might be talking about within the confines of a classroom, but in abstract kinds of ways. Experiential learning can put it in front of you, can make it tangible, can make what you're studying something that you can actually experience with all of your senses. That's good not only for maybe getting outside of the classroom and having a different sort of experience, but it can also really help your learning. It can actually improve your retention of concepts if you are able to apply those concepts in a different kind of setting that's not just the sort of contrived experience of a classroom. However well designed that class is, it's still a contrived experience. When you're out there in organizations and in the work world, what you're experiencing is authentic, and it can really drive further academic curiosity and make you ask questions about things and draw connections between things that wouldn't have happened otherwise. And experiential learning is a fantastic way to build skills. Again, because you're outside of that classroom, you may be confronted with scenarios that aren't just what a faculty member came up with in their head as an example or as an exercise that somebody designed to do in a small group in a classroom, but they can really be the kinds of things that promote authentic skill development. That means building skills in the context in which those skills will be applied and giving you an opportunity to transfer those skills into different kinds of environments. So this was just a quick brainstorm as I was throwing together the slideshow of the kinds of skills that you might be able to pick up through an internship or a practicum experience. You might have an opportunity to write a press release, or you might be able to do a public presentation that helps you practice those public speaking skills. Maybe you'll get to work on an event that you can then understand the whole process of event planning along the way. So there's tons of skills that you can pick up. These are some examples of ways that you might be able to do that through an experience like experiential learning. So we're going to do a quick activity break here, and I'm going to turn on my timer so that I don't drag this out too long, but we're going to do a few of these during the session today. So have something out that you can either write with or type on in some way. The first question is, how would you like to use experiential learning during your time at Pacific? And these are just some further prompts to get you going here. Do you need to dabble a bit for career exploration? What do you want to try? Would seeing your class material enacted in live time help your studies? How? Which studies? What way? Are there specific skills you'd like to develop or that you think would make you more competitive in your field? Let me go ahead and do a 2-minute timer on this one. Two minutes can feel like a really long time when it's quiet in a room. But as we wind down here, does anybody want to share anything that you're initially thinking about when you might do experiential learning or how you'd like to use it while you're here? Go ahead. Thank you.
I don't know if I need my Oh, gotcha. Honestly, it's one of those things where I really wish that more of our classes would implicate more real life learning skills or real life, skills depending on our area of expertise. I mean, I'm a psych student, right? So we're only able to learn so much that will actually be used in the workplace because we have so much we have to cover, right? That being said, I didn't take anything that I think is actually fully applicable to my future career until this year as a junior in a interviewing and counseling technique class.
Yeah.
And I really wish that they would offer us these types of classes that actually allow us to build these skill sets much earlier like as a freshman and as a sophomore, because it can really help you determine where you're going to want to refine your job search as you go from graduation into the workforce.
Yeah.
And also it gives you a better idea of, what you're actually going to be doing.
Yeah, thank you so much for that comment. And it really highlights for me that there's a couple of ways to think about experiential learning in terms of the developmental process of college. We have these 4 years allocated out, doesn't always work out smoothly that way for everybody. But in the earlier part of college, experiential learning is so great for that exploration, for sifting, to understand really what's out there, to start to sort and narrow and steer a little bit more. By the time you get to junior and senior year, it's a fantastic opportunity for application. Now, those two aren't mutually exclusive. It doesn't have to be one or the other. You're doing both in both cases. But the emphasis on the early side can really be in that exploration. And later on, you've built up more skill and you've built up more knowledge already. And that by that point, you might be able to contribute more to an organization in terms of what you're actually capable of doing because of what you've learned along the way. So those experiences are really important to think about on a continuum. Sometimes we think about just a one-shot deal. When am I going to do my internship? But it doesn't have to be just one, and it doesn't have to be just internship. It can be doing a civic engagement experience early on that gets you exposed to some different populations, maybe working with different kinds of people, and then a little bit later on doing an experience like an internship down the road. So I would really encourage you to think about a whole set of experiential learning opportunities that can do different things for you at different times in your academic career and in your professional life, right? Thanks very much for that comment. So let's go ahead and keep going and think about the kinds of experiential learning opportunities that we have here at Pacific. I just mentioned civic engagement courses. I oversee the McCall Center for Civic Engagement, so this is near and dear to my heart. We do have a lot of classes that meet the CE core requirement. Some of those are baked into majors so that you have to take a particular class in order to be able to get that major. In other cases, they are interdisciplinary or open to anybody without prerequisites. And there's no rule that just because you have something that's in your major that you can't take one of those other classes. We actually have a fair number of students who do that, either because it's an elective that they can check off that box, or because they're interested in the issue area and they want to get some different kinds of experiences under their belt. CE classes are structured really differently. Sometimes you get a lot of freedom and choice in what you're doing for your civic engagement experience. Sometimes you don't. Sometimes it's something that the professor has already arranged and planned ahead of time. So thinking about that and even trying to understand what the differences are between different CE classes can help shape your experience and make sure that you get a good fit with that. Internships, practica, and field experiences often go along with majors, but don't have to. So we have a few different majors at Pacific, like criminal justice law and society, public health, social work, that all require an intensive practicum experience. We're talking about something like 70 hours over the course of a semester. That kind of experience is really professionally oriented. You're really working very closely alongside a professional in your field who's doing something in the realm that you might be interested in. Internships can look a lot like that, but also can involve learning outcomes that maybe are not common for that organization or that particular role, maybe really specific to you and the kinds of things that you want to take away from that experience. And internships really range in the level of commitment that you're offering over what duration of time. So they can be a lot more flexible than a practicum experience in terms of what you're picking up along the way and what kind of thing you're committing to. Outdoor pursuits, things like voyages or going on an outdoor leadership trip. Those are a kind of experiential learning. Study abroad and domestic travel courses are a form of experiential learning. And if you make it so, your campus job or student employment while you're in college can be experiential learning. I wouldn't say that it automatically is. And I'll come back to that a little bit later in terms of how you maximize the experience. You can go to a job and clock in and clock out and not really get a lot out of it. Or you could really try to maximize those employment experiences by turning them into learning opportunities. So a few other things to consider, packed all into one slide. about how to plan, how to design an experiential learning opportunity that will be successful for you. So these are just some tips to think about as you're exploring and considering. Think about the timing of your trajectory at Pacific and when you might be able to fit in some experiential learning. For example, are you planning to study abroad, or do you have other constraints around a particularly heavy semester, a semester where you might have more time? Think about the organizations that you might be entering into. Do you want to work in a small business? Do you want to work in a large nonprofit? Are you interested in some places walking distance to campus, or does it have to be someplace that's near the job that you go to for money, right? You got to think about the practical elements of logistics along the way. Think about the kind of sector you want to work in. A nonprofit organization, a for-profit business, government. In some cases, they may operate in very similar ways, and in other cases, they may be really different, even if they're all education focused. There are education focused businesses, nonprofits, government organizations, but what they do and how they do it could be really different. So even getting some experiences in different sectors might be useful, or thinking ahead about the kind of experience you might want can be really helpful. Thinking about the organizational culture, and by organizational culture, I mean the kind of work environment it is. Is it a place where people are kind of laid back, casual, friendly? People welcome different ideas coming to the table, feel really inclusive in their approach? Is it a much more formal organization where people have really fixed things that they do, fixed roles that they play? You get a sense of that kind of a vibe when you're talking to people inside the organization, and you get a sense of what feels good, the kind of environment you want to be in, the kind of environment that matches your work style and the way that you like to contribute to organizations. Think about ways that you can stretch and challenge yourself. The best learning from experience is going to come from those things that you have to feel a little bit outside of your comfort zone and push yourself a little bit. That's where your learning, prime learning zone is. It's just a little bit outside your comfort zone, not so far that you feel inadequate or you feel not confident about what you're doing. You want to still feel good about being there, but you want to be able to reach. Think about places where you're going to feel welcomed, where they want student input. This may be surprising to some people, but actually a lot of organizations, employers really love working with students. They enjoy the energy that students bring in. They like the new perspective. They often like that students have the latest evidence, the latest research, the latest theoretical thinking that they can bring into that environment. If you're in a situation where you're trying to convince somebody to offer you an experiential learning opportunity, it might not be the right place. If they're resisting that idea in some way, maybe it's not the best fit. You want to go to someplace where you can really take the bull by the horns and do your thing and feel like you're in a good spot to do that. You got to think about logistics. I already mentioned that. And keep in mind, for all of these things, which may be sort of intimidating to sift out on your own, you already have the resources at your fingertips to help you navigate these kinds of design thinking tips. So your advisors, myself, the McCall Center for Civic Engagement, the Outdoor Pursuit staff, we're all here to help you navigate thinking about the kinds of experiences that will work best for you. So again, another 2 minutes. Thinking about the kinds of experiences that are out there, what we offer here at Pacific, your major, your plans, what type of experiential learning, or what types, might you wish to pursue, and when during your academic program? You might think about whether your major requires something. Do you know if your major requires an internship or a practicum? Are you planning to study abroad or have particular semesters that might be heavier or lighter? Can you pursue job opportunities on campus that might align with your learning goals? Take a few minutes to jot down some notes on those. About 10 more seconds. All right. So I'm curious, does anybody already have a plan in mind for when you might be able to do experiential learning? Already built in? Go ahead.
So for me, my major is psychology as well. And although a practicum or internship isn't required for that, and we do have civic engagement, but not specific to the course, for me, I feel as though the capstone is a really good way to get that experiential learning because you're doing actual research, which is fantastic. And it's a great way to apply the things that you've learned in class to what you want to do in the future, which is great.
Yeah, awesome. And psychology is one of the departments that has recognized that there are students who want different paths there in terms of capstone and have an applied capstone option alongside the more traditional sort of academic, inwardly focused option. And so they've made that available to students. I think is super. Right?
Exactly, yeah.
Okay. While Vanessa's standing, I just want to pause for a second and see if there are questions about things that I have said so far. Anything that needs clarification or that you're curious about? I'll ask again at the end. It's not an hour never. Okay. Thank you, Vanessa. Okay, so let's talk a bit about maximizing your experiences. Let's assume you got in there, you found an internship, you found a practicum experience. How do you make the most of it? There are 4 things that I want to cover as we think about that. The first 3 are really about the kind of experience itself, and then the last one is about experiential learning in general. So first off, maximizing your experience with diversity and difference. Now, remember that slide earlier that showed that for employers, and especially younger employers, they really highly value this skill of being able to work with people who have different backgrounds from you. And that doesn't matter what your identity is. There are opportunities to work with people who are different from you. So I really encourage you in thinking about working with diversity and being able to think about what you're doing as working with people who are having diverse backgrounds. Think about all the dimensions of diversity. And just as a little cheat sheet here, the core identity atom is one model for thinking about that. Thinking about gender, national origin, indigenous heritage, sexual orientation, socioeconomic status, ethnicity and race, religion and spirituality, disability, acquired and disability developmental, age and generation. You will encounter diversity among these dimensions in an experiential learning opportunity. At the very least, you're likely to encounter age diversity just by virtue of the fact that most of our students at Pacific are under 30 and many employers will be over 30, right? So that's just a little slice of the diversity pie. You're likely to experience multiple forms of diversity and be able to embrace that, be able to seek out people who are different from you in the workplace. Try to get to know them. Think about the various identities that they might bring to the table and the ways in which they are similar to and different from your own. Seek out opportunities to work with different people and try to understand their stories so that you're able to see the diversity within that group, even if it's not immediately obvious by visible characteristics. Examine the organization's practices with respect to equity, diversity, and inclusion. It's something that I'm going to say most organizations in the Portland metro area, if not around the country, are concerned about and thinking about. Now, in different ways, to different degrees, but it's an issue because we have a diverse population that comes into the workplace, and employers need people who can navigate that. We know that it's not always easy to work with people who are coming from really different backgrounds and perspectives. So employers really value that skill. They want people who feel comfortable working with other people or comfortable with the discomfort of working with people who are different from them, able to learn, understanding that there is some humility that needs to go into working with people who have a different background, right? So seek out those opportunities to work with difference. And then you will be able to have a richer experience along the way and more to show for it along the way. Think about expanding your network. Now, generationally, I hope that everybody who is watching this video has seen Ferris Bueller's Day Off. If you haven't, you really should, as part of your educational experience. Everybody has a network. You already have a network of some kind. We are now all networked together by virtue of being here together. Building your network just extends that, expands it a little bit more. So if you're looking for an opportunity, start with everyone you know who knows someone who's doing something that you're interested in doing as a career. If you don't know that person right now, talk to more people and get one more step out. Know somebody who knows somebody who knows somebody who's doing that thing. Your advisors, your faculty, your peers, and everybody they know are part of that mix. And as soon as you set foot in an experiential learning opportunity, your supervisor, your coworkers, your clients, your customers, and everybody that they know are part of your network. And I think about that as being important because it's not just knowing the person who's maybe doing program coordination at that job and is doing something that's interesting, but maybe that person that you're working alongside who's doing program coordination has a partner back at home who's working in an organization that you're really interested in. You might not have that direct connection and opportunity through your coworker, but you start talking, you start chatting. They learn that you're interested and think, oh, well, my partner works there. I'll let you talk to him, right? That's how networking happens. It's not just finding the person who unlocks some magical connections to other people. It's about sharing what you're interested in and getting to the people who they know. It's the next layer out that can be really, really useful in networking and that you don't even know necessarily exists until you open your mouth and start talking about your interest in what you care about, and people come out of the woodwork willing to help. Get to know people, find out what their stories are, find out what their curves have been. And you might find out that a couple stops back on their trajectory, they did something that was really interesting to you that you want to learn more about. That's part of building your network. Think about your future self. Even if right now in this moment, you think, oh, you know what? I'm not going to work here. This isn't a place that I really need to invest my relationship capital in because I'm just going to do my internship and then be done. Your future self will thank you if you take time to continue to nurture the relationships and network that you have there, because you never know where some of those folks are going to show up again down the road. You never know who's going to be in the interview seat at a different organization who moved jobs and still has an impression of you from back in your internship days. That is not a made up thing. I know that that happens. I have experienced that kind of situation happening. People move around and you never know where they're going to land. So it pays off to continue to treat every single experience like it's a career building kind of experience. And keep in touch. Actually, it's really funny timing on this. Just this morning, I got an email from a former student. He graduated in 2020. He was a pandemic graduation kid. And every so often, I'm going to say every 6, 7, 8 months, something like that, I'll get an email from him. Just updating me, telling me where he's working now, what he's up to. Once in a while, there might be a question in there like, what are you up to? How are your kids? He knows I have kids. And once in a while, there's a request in there. Is it okay if I list you as a reference? Would you mind writing me a letter of recommendation? Telling you what, when he applies to occupational therapy school in a couple of years, he is going to get a great letter of recommendation from me because I know what he's been up to. He's been reaching out. He shows that he cares about me and is interested in me too. And he's telling me all of these amazing things that he's been doing from the time that I worked with him as a student a few years later. He's fresh in my brain. I don't have to do any like, what's that guy again? Kind of thinking. And I know what he's been up to. So it'll be really easy for me to write a really great letter of recommendation for him. It doesn't have to be extensive and it doesn't have to be formal. Maybe it's through social media. Maybe it's through just that occasional drop in or that occasional email, but keeping in touch is really, really valuable as you're building your network. So think a little bit about you and what you bring to the table and what is hard for you and what you're really good at when it comes to relationships. Embracing diversity and difference and extending your network involve relationship building. So what's hard about that for you? And what do you do really well? Think about who you could talk about and get feedback about your personality and your interpersonal skills. Think about people in your life now or people you might meet in a practicum or experiential learning opportunity who could help you maximize that. And let's take another couple minutes. Okay. Any concerns or windows of opportunity you perceive when it comes to relationship building and networking? Questions about that? Sarah?
So I do have individuals in my network who were my previous supervisors or advisors, and now I'm at a different institution, but we're still friends on Facebook and Instagram. So should we keep in mind that level of becoming friends and professionals, and or is there a fine line that we should be careful of so that in the future we can reach out when it comes to like letters of recommendation and stuff like that?
That is such a great question. I'm going to repeat it just in case anybody didn't quite catch that. So the question is around how relationships evolve over time. And you may have a different relationship with a supervisor or a coworker, and you may have a new role. You may become actual personal friends at some point. You may connect in different ways, both on social media and in actual real time. And how does that change the dynamic in terms of networking and professional relationships? And I think that that's especially important in this day and age when those lines between professional life and personal life can get really blurry. They get blurry in terms of our time and when people are expected to work. They get blurry in terms of relationships and social media, what you share with whom and when and how and all of that. And so I do think that it is important in general in the job search, and this is something that our career advisors might weigh in on as well, to think about anything that is public facing in social media with a professional lens of what might somebody look up if they are Googling you or searching for you on Facebook or LinkedIn or Insta, what have you. It is the default tendency now for employers to search and to look up employees. It's not at all uncommon. So on that level, just sort of general rule, be careful what you put out there publicly, because anything that you have out in the public sphere can reflect on you professionally, period. However, I think that it's really great to have people who are in your life who are in the hybrid space of personal and professional. I can certainly say for myself that both my work life and my personal life have been enriched by having people who I feel are in that zone. It can get tricky sometimes, and I think it's helpful to have frank conversations about things that maybe are confidential, that you rather people not share, about things that maybe are gems of wisdom or advice that you want to get from somebody, and to be able to say things like, I know that we have this personal relationship now. Would it still be appropriate for me to ask you for a letter of recommendation? And how would you feel about that? And being able to agree together how you want to approach those kinds of situations. I have people who I maybe met through volunteer experience or through my personal life who have just become more and more a part of my life over the years. And sometimes we have to figure out which box we're in when we are having a particular kind of conversation. Is this something that needs to stay in this box so that we can have this box over here be open and be a different category of conversation? Some of that is sort of a false way of allocating our time and our relationships, and it can feel awkward to do that. But having the honest conversation is what allows you to then be able to engage in a professional relationship with somebody and to be able to say, yeah, you know this history of me, or you know this silly thing that I did on that weekend. But let's focus right now on the professional way that you know me and how that could, how that relationship might work together, because we're both part of our network as well. Does that help? Okay. Let's go ahead and move on and think about a couple more things related to maximizing your experience. And then I want to make sure we get to how to actually apply this all to your job search. So just some quick ideas. When you are out there in experiential learning, I think one of the best, most important takeaways is related to your understanding of how organizations work. And if I can just be really transparent and honest, when I'm working with students of a traditional college age background, 18 to 22, in general, it's a time in a person's life when they have just not had as much experience with different kinds of organizations. For many students, and I find this true of Pacific students, they may have had a job in high school, maybe their campus job is their first job. They may know high school. They may know an activity like Future Farmers of America or an organization like the Boy Scouts, but they don't know very much about the way things really work in organizations. How do things really get done? Who's actually making decisions? How do programs unfold? How does fundraising happen? What is budget? How does it work? All of that stuff is stuff that you absorb from being in different contexts and environments and watching and learning and picking up along the way. Oh, okay. So this person's in charge, but this is the person who's really getting things done. I'm pretty sure that it was in my first internship experience when I was in college. I had two, and they were both great. I'm pretty sure that it was in my first internship experience when I realized that the receptionist was actually the person who knew the most about that organization and the way it worked. In my head, because I didn't know organizations, I thought that a receptionist was a person who reported to other people, who was told what to do all the time. No. The receptionist is often the most powerful person in an organization because they know all the things. They have so much institutional wisdom. They have so much knowledge about what's going on in that operation that they're bringing that into their life. I wouldn't have known that if I hadn't observed that during my internship experience. I might have gotten there eventually, but that helped me to understand it much quicker. And it also helped me understand that if I took a receptionist job early in my career, it wasn't in any way a setback or a settling thing. It was valuable experience to help me understand the way that organization would work. Go to meetings, take advantage. I mean, I can't even believe I'm saying go to meetings. Meetings can be a drag. They can be boring. They can be disorienting. They can be poorly facilitated, but it's often how you learn what's going on. So you have opportunities, or you can invite yourself, which in an internship kind of context would be something like asking your supervisor if it's okay, if you're able to go to that meeting. Take advantage of that. They might assume that you don't want to go, but they would be missing out on a potentially valuable organizational dynamic and interpersonal conversations that you wouldn't want to miss out on. Look for the different roles people play, both informal and formal. So you've got the positions, the actual jobs that people do, but who's the best collaborator in that organization? Who is it who's the cheerleader, who's really getting people excited about something? Who is it who's the leader behind the leader? The person who has the leader's ear, the person who's the trusted confidant of the person who's really making the decisions, right? try to sift through those behind the scenes roles that people play. Ask about the history and context of your work. What was the background of your position or the organization? Seek out projects and activities that involve working with different areas of the organization so that you can see how maybe this department operates differently from that department. To try to get the most of you can out of that experience. And I'm going to talk about this pretty briefly, but just to put this in context, the best learning that you can get from experience doesn't just happen. It happens because we make it happen. We make it happen through the process of metacognition. Whenever I'm doing an experiential learning presentation, I have to include this frog because I secretly love it. We have a unique capability as humans of thinking about our thinking. To the best of our knowledge, frogs don't spend a lot of time thinking about their thinking, but we can unpack that. We can spend time thinking, well, why did I assume that a receptionist wouldn't have that same kind of knowledge? What was it about my experience that would make me think that? And what can I benefit from? How can I learn from understanding that in a new kind of way, right? Think about our thinking. And because we're talking about experiential learning in the context of an academic environment, you almost always are going to have some kind of class-based assessment that's going to help facilitate that learning process for you and with you, right? So you will have an internship journal that you're doing. You may be asked to do a presentation. You might have to put together a portfolio. That's why you work with faculty to shepherd this experience and to make sure that you are extracting all of the learning that you possibly can out of that experience along the way. So as you're thinking about this, think about what you have control over. You can steer your experiential learning opportunities to a certain extent. There's constraints, maybe in terms of academics, you do have certain things that you have to do in a certain order. Sometimes internships or experiential learning opportunities are competitive and you have to actually apply and be accepted and go through a process. But largely, you can steer what you want to do. So take advantage of that to be in the driver's seat. It's a two-way street. You should benefit, but also the organization that you're working with should benefit. I would be a little bit remiss if I didn't say that, as an institution, it's important to us that you represent Pacific well. We have relationships with these organizations. We want to be able to continue to offer opportunities to other students. So everybody should feel good about it, but there is sometimes, something that goes wrong. And we're here to help troubleshoot as well and help you figure out what to do if it's not the perfect experience for you. It never is. And you can take advantage of the resources at Pacific to help you get the most out of that. And I'll come back to that in a little bit. But I'm going to go down because I'm starting to run out of time here and make this a 1-minute reflection of an experiential learning goal that you want to set for yourself. And then Melissa will talk a little bit more about how to work this stuff into your search. What's one experiential learning goal to set for yourself? Okay. Anybody want to share their goal? Go ahead.
I think that one point that you made that was more eye-opening for me was networking, which is something that I don't know, I think would be a good goal for me, especially when I think about my capstone research and how I'll be going to events like the Western Psychological Association conference. That's a great opportunity to do things like that. So that's my goal.
Excellent. That's great. And I gotta say, networking, when I first heard about that idea, the thing that came to mind to me was like people mingling at a dinner party, which is terrifying to me, right? That is not what I enjoy doing. I enjoy dinner parties. I do not enjoy mingling with people I do not know at dinner parties. That is really not what networking is. It may be for some people, but for most of us, networking is just about getting to know people, sharing what you're interested in, and connecting. And that can happen with just a conversation, right? So it is helpful, I think, to think about networking as being something that we can all do. It doesn't require fancy pants, and that we're all doing already just by virtue of how we connect with each other. I want to turn things over to Melissa for a few minutes to close this out with some tips on how to work these experiences into your next step of a job search.
Okay, so I am the internship coordinator. I work in academic and career advising. And so I really think everybody should do some sort of experiential education. I don't think an internship is what everybody should do, but you need to follow these steps that Stephanie has laid out so nicely and explore what is the right thing for you and the right way for you to get experience. But as Stephanie mentioned at the very beginning, that +1 reason, employers really like to see that you've engaged in something and that you have some tangible skills and that you've experienced something. And so, as she mentioned, there's a whole lot of different ways to do this. So internships, practicum, civic engagement, study abroad, all of those things should find their way into your job search and the way that you present yourself when you're searching for a job. And so the obvious one is resume, right? All of those experiences can go on your resume. And the best way to write a resume is by using active verbs. And so experiential education, by definition, you're engaging in the experience. And so making sure that you're using really strong verbs, using specific details, and any results that you've achieved in those experiences, that's a really great way to beef up your resume and make it more compelling. Employers want to hire somebody who has created results or done something great. And so being able to incorporate that into your resume is awesome. And as Stephanie mentioned also, recommendations is a really awesome outcome of a good experiential education. You've made a close connection with a potential mentor or somebody that you've worked closely with. They've seen you shine. And so they could be a recommender for a graduate program, or they could be a reference when you're applying for a job. And then this last one, interview answers. I think that, you know, your experience is limited if you were only in a classroom during college, right? How can you actually answer questions about how would you handle this situation? And there's a whole theory on types of interview questions, but it's based on behavioral. There's a whole vein of behavioral interview questions. And so they're questions like, what would you do in this situation? Or what would you do if this happened? And the idea is that the way that you handled a past situation predicts how you would handle a future situation. So if you've never put yourself in the position to have had experiences like that, you don't know how you would react in the future. And so it really gives you more confidence when you're answering interview questions. It gives you more specific examples. And examples are the other thing that you should definitely try to incorporate into an interview answer, because you can tell somebody anything you want. But if you can demonstrate it and show it with an example, it lands so much better and it's so much more compelling. And so bringing all of these things that you're gaining from your experiential education will help you in all 3 of these areas. And Pacific is really generous with internship credits. So if you think that that is the right fit, or if you have a paid position and you think that you could make connections to your academics, come and see me and we can talk through whether or not you could get academic credit. Sometimes you need to get credit for it because that's the only way you can build the space into your schedule and have the time to commit to it. And Pacific knows that. And so we have a lot of options. And also, if you need a sounding board, I'm always available. Anybody in the academic and career advising can talk you through what your options are and what are the pros and cons of lots of different opportunities, as can Stephanie.
That's right. And I think I'm going to remember which order my slides are here. I'm going to skip this one, but I'm just going to say it so that you can have it in your head as you're leaving today, because we're almost done. After being here today, what's one experience that you could go back and add to your resume right now? So thinking about past experiences, what you actually learned from those experiences, even if you didn't think about them at the time as experiential learning opportunities, and what could you now throw onto your resume based on that experience that maybe wasn't there before. I'm going to come back to this. So Melissa just mentioned getting in touch, so that's what I wanted to pick up on. We have lots of resources here. We have our academic and career advising office. We have the Handshake platform that Vanessa manages that has internship opportunities that are just posted there on a regular basis, as well as those that are actively recruiting. And we have the McCall Center for Civic Engagement that can help you with more of the community-based service or volunteer kinds of opportunities that you might be interested in. We can also help you with the troubleshooting when something goes wrong. And don't forget that faculty, staff, and students are also part of your network. So even if it's a work study supervisor that you didn't think about being part of your network for the long term, maybe they're the one who has a partner at home who's doing the thing that you want to do, right? So they're part of your network too. Faculty often have connections in the field that you might be interested in, and some maybe previous history working with those folks. So leverage those connections. So coming back up to this one, 10 great reasons that we've talked about today for experiential learning, and then the one more, personal fulfillment. I think that experiential learning can be such a great way to really embrace learning opportunities in college. And it can be fun, it can be enriching to work in new environments, it can be exciting to be a part of a real project that's outside of the classroom. So do it for yourself, if not for any of these other reasons, do it for yourself. So with that, please let me know if you have any questions or anything that you want to follow up on about this presentation. I'm happy to meet and talk further or to point you in the right direction for resources. And I didn't check the chat as all, but I see a little thing there. Are there any questions in chat that I should address? Okay, thank you. Have a great afternoon, rest of the day today.